Nigerians will be taken to the streets reportedly today, kicking off a nationwide protest movement demanding an end to bad governance. Nigerian youth, civil society groups are calling for President Bola Tinubu's administration to reverse some of its recent economic policies, especially the high cost of petrol. There's also been concerns that the protests will turn violent, and many groups across the nation have withdrawn from the protest action. Now, though the Nigerian government has made several moves to dissuade protesters, young Nigerians have insisted on proceeding with the demonstration today. We're going to be x-raying the little details surrounding the calls for a protest and the reaction of the Nigerian government to it. And of course, the possible details about what would likely come out or play out today in a bit. But that happens right after this very short break. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. We, of course, are having discussions concerning the End Bad Governance protest that is meant to start this morning across Nigeria. We, of course, stopped by in Abia State with Chinwe Ogele, News Central's reporter who's there. And from what it seems, the last time we spoke to her, which is just a few minutes ago, there doesn't seem to be much going on there. Will Lagos be different? Will the Federal Capital Territory be different? Will, maybe things change in a bit? We don't know, but we'll see. But this morning, to x-ray details concerning the protest, we have joining us the Executive Director, Enough is Enough Nigeria, Okwemi Ademoleko. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having
me. We'll probably just start with conversations concerning the idea behind the protest and your expectations for today. So let's first of all get your views on the need for a protest generally, and then what your expectations are, as things will turn out today.
All right. Just a caveat. I do work and serve at an organization called Enough is Enough, but we're not organizers. We're certainly amplifying the call for it because we believe citizens have the right to protest. I think protest usually becomes a tool of last resort when you don't believe that the government is listening. So you've written letters every day on any news show in Nigeria, on radio, on TV, print media, online. Nigerians are talking about their challenges. They're complaining in one way or the other. We're doing programs to talk about managing in hard economic times, blah, blah, blah. During June 12, Democracy Day, there were protests in terms of reminding people of the journey that we have a democracy, but also saying that things are hard. Now, if you take sort of the sequence of events of people complaining that things are difficult, cost of goods, and you feel that government is not responding, nothing is happening, nothing is changing, protests then become a tool of last resort in saying that, okay, you need to hear what we're saying. Yeah. So the notice was given, I'll call it a notice, about 4 weeks ago when the hashtag End Bad Governance started online. And there were a bunch of polls asking people what will your demands be. And that have just kind of snowballed over the last 4 weeks into what we now have, what we have now. What are my expectations? I expect it to be a bit different. As you rightly said, in different states, it will be expressed differently. Some states will have people turn out. Some states, maybe no one, maybe a few. But the states that will be interesting to watch will be Lagos, obviously, Abuja, Ogun, and Kwara, because those 4 locations have actually gotten judgments to restrict where citizens show up. So it'll be very interesting how that plays out.
Okay, we're going to talk about, even those judgments in a bit, but I've always, in the last couple of days, I have pointed out the silence from the Nigerian president, which, some people might say is irrelevant. He doesn't have to say anything. He's busy being president. So, I want to get your view on that. Is it important? Is that something that you've also noticed that is maybe unusual? That president has stayed silent, in the weeks leading to the protest, on the day of the protest, starting. There's not been actually, any word from Mr. President. How relevant is his speech at this time?
I think we talk about body language a lot. And for me, that's loud, in a sense. And it's loud because it just affirms that, as I say, he doesn't really care. In the weeks leading up to the protest, when the demand started unfolding, anyone that cares about citizens and even cares about not having a protest will then be interested in engaging and trying to do things to address concerns. However, what we've seen the government do, including Mr. President, is spend more time engaging stakeholders to stop the protest. So traditional rulers, religious rulers, youth groups, elders, whatever, trying to get them to stop the protest. Then we've seen government fund protesters to protest against not having a protest. And so when you invest time and energy in doing everything, and then fear-mongering, and so the last bit will be constantly referring to we cannot have a repeat of NSAS. We cannot have a repeat of the violent NSAS protests and the consistent use of the word violent with NSAS. And we constantly have to remind the federal government that there was no violence until the federal government unleashed the violence. In Abuja, there were brand new SUVs that dropped off men with machetes at protest grounds. In Lagos, it was the military that shot, as the Lagos NSAS panel found, and the ECOWAS court. And I remember in Lagos, at the time when we started noticing a breakdown of law and order, and we called the police and said, look, this is beginning to happen, as obviously there are criminals in every society. And once you see a lax that, oh, there's an opportunity to be a criminal, people will do that. Has nothing to do with protesters. And when we called the police to draw their attention, the rapid response squad in Lagos, the response to us very clearly was, you are protesting against the police. You say you don't want police, sort yourselves out. So, and that's the constant response for us to government, is saying it is your job to protect citizens. So if you spend more time focusing on them, the protest must be peaceful, people want to hijack it, there are foreign mercenaries, and don't spend the same amount of time using that intelligence to stop those people, then really there's almost, it's almost like you're conniving with them by focusing on us.
There was also a bomb, that was found somewhere in Lagos yesterday.
Right.
How convenient.
Now let's share some breaking news before we come back to continue the conversation this morning. We have reports that fresh attacks, sorry, I beg your pardon. We have reports that fresh attacks have been announced in Borno State as IED has killed 19 people and injured 15 at a local tea joint in Kanuri. We'll bring more details later as our correspondent, Maru Musa, brings us more reports on that. But just to say to everyone in Borno State, please stay safe, and if you see anything suspicious, please do well to report to the nearest police station around you. Now, speaking about police station, let's talk about the role of the police. You did highlight that if they're getting enough intelligence regarding those who are potentially trying to hijack the protest, that they should probably be able to use that same amount of energy to ensure that they, forestall such attacks from happening. What I've been hearing a lot is a citation of Section 83, Sub 4 of the Police Protection Act, where they're stating that it is the role of the citizens to report their routes. Yes, but if I'm correct, if I may quote what I see there, I see Section 83, Sub 4 of the Police Establishment Act 2020, which provides as follows: where a person or organization notifies the police of his or its intention to hold a public meeting, rally, or procession on a public highway, or such meetings in a place where the public has access to, then the police officer then has the responsibility, goes for that to talk about the responsibility to protect such citizens. So now, what I see is that there have been several interpretations. Some people say that this means that citizens must report. Others say, no, it says where they report. So how do you balance the role that the police has in terms of ensuring that they protect the rights of citizens, the rights of protesters? Does this right to protect protesters includes even the protesters that are protesting against the protesters?
My own default is the Constitution, and it says very clearly, the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary responsibility of government. End. So when it comes to security, it's your responsibility. Figure out how to secure citizens. And I think which is why I said the focus on the fact that we have intelligence that they're potential hide. Okay, so then use that intelligence to find them and arrest them. Why are you making that my issue of why I cannot exercise my constitutional right to protest? And I think the back and forth of that and the fact that government has spent more time on that is where we are now, because that's been their focus. People want to hijack their miscreants, their criminals. Yes, they are. It's a society. It's your job to fish them out. Why are you using that? And I think that, and I keep talking about that because it's heightened the concern of citizens around what may or what may not happen. And in my view, it's also shown where the government is, because you've made that your focus rather than solving problems. And we keep going back to it. We will not even be protesting in the first place if society
okay.
functioned.
Yeah.
Right, and even looking at those who have talked about the sponsors of protests and the intelligence that they have gathered. Peter Obi has been accused of being a sponsor of the protest. The Obedience have been accused of being sponsors of the protest. What is your response to that? And when we're talking about these people who are trying to hijack, who are these people that are really trying to hijack the protest? Are these the citizens, or are these some politicians who are manipulating the citizens to be able to achieve their own end?
Okay, so starting point, is there hunger in the land? Yes. Is the cost of living high? Yes. Do we have waste in government? Is government too big? Yes. So all these things are yes, yes, yes. Now, if those things are solved, we'll not have a need for a protest. In any government, in any democracy, you have the government that is in power and you have opposition. By default, when you point out what the government in power is doing that people don't like, opposition amplifies that because it makes a point for their case. That if we were in office, we would listen, we would do things differently. Is that new? Is that foreign? No. Matai reminds us that in 2012, when citizens protested under the Occupy Nigeria protest, the same members of APC who were in opposition at that time amplified that protest because it met their need as opposition. Was there anything wrong with that? No. It was opportunistic, most certainly. But could they make the case that if we were in government, we would do better? Yes. That's the whole nature of politics. So accusing Peter Obi of sharing same values with the people who are protesting is par for course. It's expected. Now, when we now go to people who are sponsoring the protest, and I like how young people have responded. These are the sponsors of the protest. Bola Tinubu because of your policies, Wale Edun because of this, and listing the fact that we're protesting because you have failed to do your job. So the fact that, and again, the fact that government has spent more time in looking for sponsors, in looking for saboteurs, in worried about criminals, rather than solving the problems, just for me says where their intent is. And this goes back to your question earlier, why the president hasn't addressed the country. Remember NSAS as well, there was a demand for Buhari to address. When he did make an address, he said nothing about the protesters, said nothing about what was happening, just kind of spoke about it, not around the issues that the protesters were talking about. So we're at the same point, I would say.
All right, so now let's also, get into another conversation, also around the protest. I don't know if we can point to these, and I think the producers can put this on screen, the 10 demands for the protesters. I think this came out, a couple of days ago. End bad governance protest, yes, exactly that one. So I don't know if we can hold on to this because there's no actual leadership, and nobody knows where this emanated from. Omoyele Sowore, who we spoke with yesterday, also had his own demands, there were about 15 of them. So let's look at some of them, right?
I will not speak to this, and I'll be very clear about that, because I think this is rubbish. Let me not say it that coldly. I think it's evolved, and I've seen a new one that has 10 that's a bit clearer, and I can speak to that because I've seen that, and I kind of align with what those demands are. So, for example, one of the demands of that is an implementation plan for the Orosanye report. One of the things that we've talked about is the size of government. And when the Orosanye report was published in 2012, we had about 540 odd departments, agencies, and parastatals. Now we have over 1,500. And so the demand, and then this administration is now trying to set up a new ministry of livestock or whatever. So again, when you're saying there's no money to do certain things and you're continually increasing the size of government, there's a discrepancy there. So the demand is an implementation plan for the Orosanye report. One of the other demands is also around electoral reform, that results are it's mandatory, not optional, to transmit results. There's one that I particularly like around the Constitution. So we've talked about the fact that the Constitution is not of the people. We've talked about the 2014 Constitutional Conference report. I think the demand says that there should be an amendment to the Constitution, excuse me, that allows for referendums. So that means on certain issues, major issues like the Constitution, you can put it to the vote to Nigerians and they can easily say yes, no, without a long process. There's a demand to release NSAS protesters, for example, to listen to the ECOWAS judgment, and the states that had judicial panels to actually implement the findings from their panels, including paying compensation for those who had been affected. Insecurity is also a big one. We talk about the fact that we have police officers. There's a friend of mine that says police officers are available for rent. You can go into police station and organize 2 police officers that you pay that follow you around.
Yeah.
There's no, it happens.
Right.
Meanwhile, we say there's insecurity, and we say divert the appropriate resources to protect citizens. So those are the ones that I remember off the top of my
and I
head.
know that your organization, EIE Nigeria, posted these 10 demands.
We retweeted.
Yes, we have hunger, hunger, cost of living insecurity, government waste and cost of governance, bloated National Assembly, which speaks to the Orson report you've talked about, which they had 12 weeks to implement and we've not heard anything about. End SARS, protect farms and farmers, human capital development, electoral reform, establish a living wage, and constitutional and judicial reform.
That's the same one that was on the screen, isn't it?
No, it's not the same one.
Yeah,
it's a different one.
It's a different one. That one I think is also very interesting when we talk about the living wage instead of a minimum wage. In 2012, during Occupy Nigeria, minimum wage was 18,000 naira, which at that exchange rate was about $128. The new minimum wage we have now is 70,000 naira, which is about $46.
We've gone back.
Yeah.
So when you think about it in terms of context, it's not a living wage. Yes, it's a higher amount of money, but the purchasing power is much lower.
Okay, but also looking at what these demands are, there's a fresh unofficial demand that we're seeing on social media, which is that Akpabio must go. He's been referred to as someone who has been careless with his words, insensitive to the plight of the Nigerian people. And very recently, there was a video that's gone viral. He said, and I quote, "We are not even interested in regime change. Those who want to protest should protest. We will be here eating."
I love it. And I think to be honest, and that point is actually very important about a new demand. What the protest has also shown, I think NSAS was, I've been part of Bring Back Our Girls for a long time. It's a single issue demand.
Yeah.
Return the girls. NSAS was pretty basic. Scrap SAS and provide for security and stop police brutality. This bad governance, because it's so wide, everybody is speaking from their pain points. I was on a Spaces yesterday. By the time I dropped off, there were 25 demands. 25. And as I listened to people, it was just everybody was saying what was paining them that they wanted done. They must not, look at that, and I think this speaks to that exactly. By this morning, because of Akpabio's statement, this is now a demand. And to be honest, I think it's a demand that will be very easy to rally around. And for me, for Mr. Akpabio, one, the fact that he became a senator violated the electoral process because he should not have been eligible to run for office. And having then done that, he's now become the Senate president. And this is probably the third or fourth thing in a series of events. Natasha was the previous one that he had to apologize. Before that, I think he was also caught on camera, I think in that December, telling them that
prayers in your emails.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are just too many things about how, and let's not forget, if anything happens to the president and the vice president, that is our president by law. So let's be clear.
Yeah. So what are your expectations, right? It's meant to be 10 days. The president hasn't spoken. The NLC and the NMA and ASU, have the experience with dealing with the, Nigerian government. Whenever they choose to protest or they choose to go on strike, the government makes promises, everybody goes back to work, and then none of these promises are, met a lot of times. Do you expect it's the same thing that might play out, or do you, think that maybe, government is really just going to ignore, everybody and keep doing what they're doing?
I think they will try to ignore. That's my sense, because that's what they've done so far, is ignore and just either with court judgments or with intimidation. We saw the videos of, for example, Lagos Island, people being threatened if they come out to protest. What this will be a test of really just how tired Nigerians are.
All right.
Will people come out?
Let's see if people have.
And I think they will.
I'm going to get into,
we have
that.
Our correspondent who's currently at Lekki Tollgate. Hopefully they would allow him film this time. Bernard Akede is in Lekki at the Tollgate. Good morning, Bernard. What is the situation there where you are? Bernard, we're struggling with your audio.
Hello, can you guys hear me in the studio?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now? I can hear you clearly.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, guys. Of course, we're back here at the Lekki Toll. The nostalgia of all what happened yesterday. For those who missed it, we were supposed to shoot live at 6 p.m. on the 6 p.m. bulletin here. We had taken permission, as we usually do. We were granted 10 minutes to broadcast live, and then a police officer came. I want to believe it's misunderstanding. He came and disrupted our live broadcast got a little bit funny, but eventually we were able to speak to a more superior officer who allowed us, after several minutes, to go live and continue our broadcast. But all that is bygone. Now we're here today. Arriving in this place today, the road has been really light. Remember that it's not a public holiday. Remember that there's been no curfew announced. Movement has not been restricted. However, I think it's just precautionary measures. That's why people are not on the road. If you are thinking of going out with public transport, you may have some difficulty going out to the streets of Lagos. Now, I'm going to start from my right, where we have an array of security operatives. There's a truck, a truck from the Nigerian Army, or owned by the Nigerian Army, with Army officers standing by. I'm sure just in case anything goes wrong, they want to ensure that there's safety. Now, besides the Army officials, behind me you can see police officers dressed in their police uniform. We've seen men and women patrolling this area. We've also seen mobile police officers patrolling the area. We've seen officials of the NSCDC also in the area who have been moving back and forth just to ensure that everything is safe and there's no disturbance. We spoke to the person who's in charge of the mobile police team earlier this morning, and he said he just wants to be sure that our presence here will not attract unnecessary attention to the area. And we made it clear that that's not why we are here. Everything has been fine until something interesting happened. And I'll show it to you now. And I'm going to pan to my right. Very soon you're going to see a few men with some reflective jackets right there. I don't know if you can see them. Yes, these men came in vehicles, about 5 vehicles, 3 or 4 SUVs, and then 2 buses looking like commercial buses. Now, these men are wearing reflective jackets. On those jackets is written NURTW, National Union of Road Transport Workers. We're not sure what their mission is here, but they came here in buses and in SUVs. They're parked somewhere behind me. We're waiting to see what exactly it is, their purpose, what exactly their mission is here, as a matter of fact. But besides all of that, it is safe here at the toll gate. There's security presence. Vehicular movement, very light. Again, there is no curfew. It's not a public holiday, but I just want to believe that people are being cautious of their movements in and around Lagos. That's pretty much what's going on here at the toll.
All right, that's very interesting and nice way that you've also delivered that. It would be nice if you can speak with the NURTW men, just to get a view of what they're there for, if they're going to be part of the protest, or if they have some, traffic to control in that area this morning. So if you can speak with them, we'd love to hear what their stance is. Well, thank you very much, Bernard. We'll join you again. All right. Very interesting. Let's get back to you. I mean, your quick reactions to that, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, not surprising that traffic is light in Lagos. Traffic was very heavy last night as people made their way to shops and tried to get home, I would say. NURTW, I mean, I'm sure they're not there protesting.
Okay. I mean, does it also, cause a distraction when there is, like you said, at the end of the spaces that you had yesterday, those 25 demands? We've also seen different.
I dropped off.
Oh, when you dropped off.
So it might have ended at 50, I don't know.
Yeah, but now there is the different ones, different lists. Omoyele Shower, like I said, had his own list of 15, which included scrapping the 1999 Constitution, releasing Nnamdi Kanu, unconditionally, reinstate a corruption-free subsidy regime to reduce hunger, just a lot of things, and banditry, terrorism, and violent crime. So does this create some confusion as to what exactly the protest hopes to achieve?
It does. It creates a bit of confusion in terms of, even from a government perspective, so what demands are we looking at? But I think ultimately for a government that is good intentioned, because at the heart of all of this is people are just complaining that there's bad governance and lack of accountability. So if that is responded to in a clear manner and communicated clearly, I think it would help take the edge off, because people would see that government cares. And there are institutions, I mean, we all have representatives at the national level, at the state level. We have local government chairmen, there are community leaders. If those processes are engaged to let people know that these actions are being taken, we're protecting farmers, we're dealing with NSAS protesters. I mean, so clear actions can be taken for government to show good faith. If government doesn't want to show good faith, they will harp on the fact that there are too many demands, we don't know who we're talking to, we're looking for, there's no leader. And that constant conversation of there's no leader. Release NSAS protesters. Why do you need a leader for that? Like, what is a leader supposed to do for you? Next question should be, where are they? can you produce a list? And if you're given a list, release them. Why do you need a leader to do that? So this constant thing about facelessness and leaderlessness, as a, in my view, as a ruse not to do anything, also speaks to lack of intent.
Are we starting to see some level of inconvenience? I won't say inconvenience, but I think, speaking out loud, I would say, are we starting to see an increase in that happening around the continent? Because in the most recent time, it was Kenya, and then we heard of Uganda, and then there's Ghana now that we're starting to see an unplanned protest. Even speaking about unplanned protests, there are those who feel that these protests would have been more effective if the notice wasn't too long. It was such a short notice and everybody hit the streets, but that they worry about the effectiveness of the protests going forward. Do you share such concerns as well?
Maybe, and I think part of it is also the challenge of not having. So if it was a name like Labour can call a protest in 4 days because they have the foot soldiers to make that process go through around the country. This started off on social media. So to garner kind of momentum to get people gingered does need a bit of more lead time than you would if you had through an organized process rather. And as momentum, people gained momentum, people then became more aware that, okay, that is true. I am upset. I do want to express myself. So yeah, it has its pros and cons. But as I said at the beginning, government has actually done a lot more in terms of publicizing this protest than we could have done ourselves on social media.
Well, what would it signify if we don't see, at the end of today, numbers out protesting? What would that mean? Would that signify that there's many more people who are content with the way the government has handled the current Nigeria, or there's just not many people who care that much about protesting? And what would it also mean going forward?
Well, I don't think that people not protesting means that they support that their quality of life is good. I think that one, I don't need, a protest is doesn't validate what data shows, that the cost of living is high and people cannot afford to eat. So you not coming out to protest doesn't tell me that that's not the case. 1, 2, does it mean that some people don't believe in protests and some people will not come out, and that's fine. We all have our constitutional right. The protest has been scheduled from August 1 to 10. So I would say that what happens on day 1, it's the beginning. NSAS did not get to how it ended from day 1. Yeah. The momentum built over time. And I just think it'll be interesting to see how this builds over time, because government's response also will influence how citizens choose to respond.
And you mentioned earlier how Labour is able to garner crowd because they have a lot of foot soldiers. And this is, of course, a protest that started from social media. Labour has dissociated itself from this protest. Will that have an impact on the protest?
I think what's interesting is, again, let's remember Occupy Nigeria. Occupy Nigeria was started by citizens who, when the fuel increase was announced, took to the streets, to your point, spontaneously. It wasn't planned. There was no long lead time. Labour joined them when they realized that the narrative had gone beyond them. Like, it was more or less like watching people gather, and we're like, wait a minute, they didn't call us, they don't need us, we have to join. And I see that being a possible outcome of this as well. Because again, part of the demand affects them in terms of a living wage. When they did sign with government the 70,000 naira, the NLC president came out and said it was sort of agreement under duress to bring the impasse to an end. So if part of the demand is that realizing that this is not a living wage and people are willing to protest for you on that, it might be an incentive to join at some point.
Also,
I think yesterday I did see this, I'm not sure who the first page that shared it, but it's from the President Bola Tinubu Media Center, Trust the Process. And it does like a comparison between then and now when they got into office. It says then foreign reserves, $34 billion, now $37 billion. Minimum wage, 30,000 naira, now 70,000 naira. Ways and means, debt, 27 trillion, now 16 trillion. Even if there's, also an appeal to move it to 10%. $7 billion forex backlog. It, then says now it has been cleared. Oil production was 900,000 barrels per day. Now it's 1.6 million barrels per day. Debt to revenue ratio 97%, now 64%. Are these convincing?
Not at all. Because at the end of the day, they're figures that don't translate into my quality of life. So, and I think let's also not forget, it's quite, I think, very trite for the Tinubu administration to compare. It's the same APC administration. And I think also let's not forget that last year during elections, even though the outcomes of the elections were contested, what was clear and cannot be contested is that more people voted against APC. So if you add all the non-APC votes, they by far outstripped the number of votes that APC got. So I think in terms of a referendum on how APC performed, people voted against APC, but we do have an APC government. Now, reserves, all of that, yeah, there might be the numbers on a piece of paper, but as corruption increased, yes. Has anybody been prosecuted for it? No. Is the cost of living high? Yes. Is insecurity high? Yes. So they can do their list of what they think they've done well in numbers, and Nigerians have done their list of where they think they failed and how it's affecting their lives. And I think for me, by far, that's more important than telling me that foreign reserves has increased. And so what?
Okay. Now, on a final note, how do we ensure that the negative impact that we've had to face from NSAS, that we don't see that happening? We've talked about people still being in detention, post NSAS. How do we ensure that we can preserve and protect the rights of protesters who will go out to protest today?
Two things, and I wish I knew some of them off the top of my head, but please check EIE's Twitter handle for those watching. There are numbers that people can call if anything happens, you get arrested or you need legal aid. But I do say the biggest way to prevent what happened after NSAS is for the government to do its job. There are known criminals, and we've given the examples. There were people parading on Lagos Island, threatening people from coming out to protest. I was on the call with the IG of police 2 days ago, or whatever day that was. He was told about and asked if he had seen the video. He hadn't seen the video. Someone said they would share it with him, and he said nothing to it. Till today, as we're talking now, nothing has been done. So when you know, and it's the same people, party members who you call thugs or party boys during elections, and we know how they're mobilized, who become hoodlums, quote and unquote, when there's time for protest. So when you know who's mobilizing who, we saw the people who are threatening that if you come out to protest, there will be violence, and you don't do anything against them. It would almost imply that the state is backing them because they've chosen not to do anything. So the best way to prevent anything happening and protecting citizens and security of the people and the welfare of the people is for the government to choose to do their jobs and ensure that people are protected.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess in the next few hours, we'll find out how things have turned out with the protest. Okwemi Ademoleko, it's a pleasure to have spoken with you.
Thank you.